A time travel story, written by Rosie. Davina's fingers hovered over the ancient rune, its worn edges barely visible in the fading light. She should have listened to the villagers' warnings, should have postponed her work until morning, but she'd dismissed their fears as superstition. What self-respecting archaeologist would abandon a site of such significance over an astronomical event? She traced the final symbol, her fingertip leaving a trail through centuries of dust. The rune pulsed with sudden light, and something moved under the stone floor. Blood-red eclipse light filtered through the narrow opening above. Around her, dormant runes awakened. Their carved lines glowed red, flowing like blood through the ancient stone. Her heart raced. Nothing she had ever read in a book could explain this. She tried to grab her camera, trembling. Her colleagues would never believe it without proof. Years of ridicule for her theories about shifter rituals could end today. The ground beneath her feet trembled, not the subtle vibration of distant machinery, but something alive and waking. A thin crack appeared in the stone where she had traced the last rune. It grew as she watched, releasing old dust that made her eyes water. The crack grew wider. Her rational mind offered explanations: geological displacement, pressure changes, even an earthquake. Nothing explained the low growl that echoed from the darkness below. The thing crawling from the crack was hard to describe. Its shape suggested wolf, but no wolf stood 7 feet tall. No wolf had eyes like burning sulfur, or teeth that dripped viscous ichor. Its charcoal fur hung in matted clumps, ancient dust and something dark crusted between the coarse hairs. Impossible, she thought, though it stood right before her eyes. Some unknown species preserved in the tomb? A hallucination from toxic spores? The effects of oxygen deprivation in the sealed chamber? Explanations formed and died in her mind, each more desperate than the last. A sound like grinding mountains filled the chamber as the ceiling began to give way. Dust and pebbles rained down, stinging her exposed skin. She looked up and saw cracks spiderwebbing across the ceiling. The creature took a step toward her. Its paw, larger than Davina's head, left a smoking impression on the stone. Archaeological curiosity surrendered to survival instinct. She backed toward the narrow corridor that had led her to this chamber, her eyes never leaving the approaching creature. She ran. Behind her, the creature's massive form burst through the passage, its hot breath on Davina's neck. Chunks of ceiling crashed to the floor, missing her by inches. Her lungs burned. Years of careful excavation hadn't prepared her for this desperate run. The small backpack containing her notebook and camera beat painfully against her side. She should drop it, gain speed, but those notes represented months of work. Evidence no one would believe without proof. Evidence that wouldn't matter if she was dead. The creature's growl reverberated through the stone. She stumbled but kept moving. To stop was to die. Light appeared ahead, the exit she'd entered through that narrow opening hours ago, when the sun was high and the sky clear. Now blood-red twilight called, promising escape. The creature's paws pounded the ground behind her. She could smell its breath. Davina burst through the crumbling archway, throwing herself forward as the stone disintegrated behind her. For one glorious moment, she thought she'd escaped, until her boots hit loose stones at the cliff's edge. Her arms swung around in the air. The ground disappeared beneath her feet. The fall stretched into infinity. Wind rushed past her ears, drowning out her own scream. Below, black water waited, reflecting the blood-red sky. Her analytical mind cataloged final observations with strange detachment. The temperature drop as she fell, the erosion pattern on the cliff face blurring past, the perfect circle of the eclipsed moon above. Details that wouldn't matter in moments. She hit the water with force enough to break bones. Cold enveloped her, stealing her breath. Pain blossomed at her temple. Darkness crowded the edges of her vision. Her last conscious thought was oddly peaceful. At least I'll die having discovered something extraordinary. And then the dark waters claimed her, and Davina thought nothing more. Chapter 1. The first thing Davina noticed was the smell. Earth, wood smoke, something that smelled like cured leather and herbs she couldn't identify. The second thing she noticed was that she was lying on something definitely not her mattress. Davina opened her eyes slowly. A straw roof walls made of woven wood and clay, sunlight filtering through an opening covered by a leather curtain. She sat up carefully. Her body felt different, lighter. Her muscles responded strangely, as if she were wearing new equipment. She looked at her own hands. They were smaller, more delicate.
Okay. This is new.
Davina said aloud, her voice sounding slightly different, softer, younger. She stood, testing her legs. They worked fine. Better than fine, actually. She felt a strange energy coursing through her body, as if she could run for miles without tiring. The hut was small, nearly empty, some animal pelts on the floor serving as a bed, a crude wooden chest in the corner, a clay pitcher. Very specific setting for a dream, she thought, walking to the entrance. My subconscious is really going all out today. She pulled aside the leather curtain and stopped. Outside stretched an entire village, wooden and thatched huts scattered across a huge clearing. People moving back and forth, carrying things, talking, laughing, children running, some with visible wolf tails. Smoke rose from several fires. The sky was blue without a single contrail. Davina descended the wooden steps slowly, still processing. A dream, she reminded herself. Obviously a dream. Probably hit my head when what, exactly? What was the last thing she remembered? A sturdy woman marched toward her, expression stern.
Aaron!
Davina turned.
Aaron, that must be this body's name.
Then she said something in a language Davina didn't recognize but somehow understood. Finally awake. The sun's already high and you haven't started your chores. Davina blinked. The sound coming from the woman's mouth was definitely not English, but somehow the words made sense in her head. Sorry, Davina managed to say. And strangely, the words that left her mouth were in the same odd language the woman used. I had a strange dream. Still a bit confused. Dream or not, you have work to do. The woman grabbed her arm with surprising strength and began dragging her. Come on. The others have already started preparing everything and you're late again. Davina let herself be dragged, observing everything around her with growing fascination. If this is a dream, it's incredibly detailed. She passed a group of young wolves training with wooden spears, women washing clothes in large tubs. A blacksmith, yes, an actual blacksmith, hammering something glowing red. Stop gawking at everything like you've never seen it before, the woman grumbled. You're acting stranger than usual. They arrived at an area where several she-wolves worked around large fires preparing food. The smell of roasted meat and something like porridge hung in the air. Aaron's here, the woman announced, pushing Davina forward. Finally, several heads turned. Davina felt their gazes, some curious, others disdainful, most indifferent.
Late as always,
commented a girl with an unusual hairstyle.
Sorry, Davina repeated. Then, because she needed information, can you remind me what I should be doing?
Did you hit your head or something? Maybe, Davina said honestly. Everything's a bit fuzzy. There were exchanged glances. Well, you usually handle the vegetables, peel roots, prepare herbs, that sort of thing, an older woman said. It was repetitive work, but oddly relaxing. While peeling roots that resembled rustic potatoes, Davina observed and listened. The women talked freely, apparently not minding her presence. They spoke about yesterday's hunt, 3 huge deer, about someone's son learning to shift. He can make claws appear already, about new fabric that needed to be made, and inevitably about the alpha. I heard he's going to choose someone at the next ceremony,
said the girl Davina was beginning to suspect was her close friend.
Voice low but animated. Caden, choose someone? Another woman laughed. He's refused everyone for years. Why would now be different? Because the Council of Elders is pressuring him. The pack needs an heir. Caden, Davina thought, that must be the alpha. Who do you think he'll choose? Someone asked.
Rhea, obviously. She's the strongest. Good hunter, good fighter.
Or maybe Eden, she has noble bloodlines. There were giggles. Then someone said, what about Aaron? Brief silence. Then laughter. Not cruel, but clearly amused by the idea. Aaron? She can barely carry a water bucket. Remember the last ceremony? She got so nervous she threw up before even entering the circle. Davina kept peeling vegetables, processing. So the original owner of this body was not very competent and apparently had severe anxiety. Don't be mean, the older woman said. Erin does her best. Nobody's being mean, the girl defended. It's just, true she's sweet, but she wouldn't work as an alpha's mate. Fair enough, Davina thought. More soft laughter. Davina finished with the vegetables and asked, what else do I need to do? The women looked at her, surprised. You never ask that, the girl said slowly. Usually you just do the bare minimum and then run off to hide somewhere. Well, today I'm motivated. After all, Davina thought, this was just a dream. She could do whatever she wanted. And as an archaeologist, the curiosity to explore this place was irresistible. You can take water to the warrior's training, the older woman suggested, pointing to the training field Davina had passed earlier. Davina picked up 2 wooden buckets full of water, surprisingly heavy, and started walking. Her arms trembled slightly with the weight. This body was indeed weaker, but not impossible to use. The training field was impressive. Dozens of wolfmen, some still in human form, others with visible lupine features, fighting, running, throwing spears. It was like watching her research come to life. Davina set the buckets down and stood watching, fascinated, impressive what her brain could create, she thought. One wolf in particular was fighting 3 opponents simultaneously, winning easily. None of the others could touch him. He anticipated their movements with almost irritating ease, dodging by a hair, smirking as if amused by the situation. Anthropological analysis, she tried to convince herself, while following his every move more than necessary. Are you going to keep staring? Davina turned and forgot how to breathe for a second. The man standing behind her was, objectively speaking, the rational part of her brain tried to argue. This is an excellent example of dominant alpha characteristics. above average height, developed but not excessive muscle structure, angular facial features suggesting maturity, and the non-rational part of her brain just, wow. Black hair with a few loose strands framing a face that looked sculpted, deep, intense red eyes that seemed to see through her, pale skin with scars that somehow only added to the stop. You are a professional. I asked if you're going to keep staring, he repeated, voice low and deep that she felt vibrate in her own bones. Sorry, Davina said, forcing her brain to function. I was observing the training. It's fascinating. He tilted his head slightly, those red eyes narrowing. Fascinating? Yes, the combat technique, the coordination, the sparring hierarchy. She pointed to the field. That one there is obviously the best fighter. He's fighting multiple opponents to make it challenging. The younger ones stay on the edges, watching and learning. It's a very efficient training structure. Sparring hierarchy? He tested the words as if they were strange in his own mouth. You say many odd things I don't understand. I'm an archaeologist. I study ancient cultures, rituals, social hierarchies, mythology, she replied. The problem is, this shouldn't exist with such coherence inside a dream. The only logical conclusion is, I'm dreaming some synthesis of everything I've read, and you're apparently included in that too. Caden continued staring at her. You think this is a dream? Technically, yes. So if I did this, he reached out and pinched her arm lightly. Ouch! Davina rubbed the spot. Why did you do that? You felt pain. Dreams don't hurt. Some do, Davina argued, but was beginning to doubt her own theory. This isn't a dream, little Omega. His voice was soft but firm. The Alpha, because he could only be the Alpha, kept looking at her. You're Aaron, right? He said. Apparently. Davina extended her hand without thinking. Pleased to meet you. He looked at the extended hand with deep suspicion. Right. Handshakes probably aren't a local custom. She let her hand drop. You're different, Caden said slowly. Omegas don't speak to me directly. Protocol, Davina considered, makes sense. Pack hierarchy, do you want me to bow or something? His eyes narrowed further. Are you mocking me? No, I'm genuinely asking. I don't want to be disrespectful, I just don't know the rules. He took a step closer. His shadow covered Davina completely, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You should be afraid of me, he said calmly. Why would I be afraid? Davina tilted her head, curious. Because I'm the Alpha. That's a reason for respect, not fear. Davina frowned. Caden went completely still, and something like amusement touched his lips. Not quite a smile, but the suggestion of one, as if he were too surprised to completely control his expression. You, he said, are definitely different. Behind him, training had stopped. Everyone was staring. An Omega casually conversing with the Alpha, without bowing, without stuttering. Oh, sorry if I broke protocol, she said sincerely. Like I said, everything's a bit fuzzy today. I see, he replied. Then, abruptly, the claiming ceremony is tomorrow night. Davina nodded. Yes, I heard about it. He looked at her. Will you participate? Davina took a moment to answer. I think I'd rather skip it. His eyes gleamed. Why? Because, Davina hesitated. This was a dream after all. There was no reason to take part in rituals, even in dreams. I'm not sure it's a good idea. But you attend every year? Well, people change. She started to walk away. Nice meeting you. I need to return these buckets. She'd taken 3 steps when he spoke again. I expect you at the ceremony tomorrow. Davina stopped and looked back. Is that an order? Perhaps. May I ask why? He studied her for a long moment, those red eyes impossible to read. Because I'm curious, he said finally. And then he turned and walked back to the training field, leaving Davina standing there, holding 2 empty buckets, with 36 wolves staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to confusion. Chapter 2. That night, Davina didn't sleep. How could she? She lay on a bed of animal pelts, in a body that wasn't hers, in an era that shouldn't exist anymore. She turned on her side, staring at the uneven wall. I'm still here, she thought. Dreams don't usually last this long. And then, Caden's image surfaced in her mind. The way the late afternoon light caught his black hair, the minute details of his scars, the absolute intensity of his eyes. Too detailed, too specific. Her brain wasn't that creative, no one's was. I died, that has to be it. I fell from that cliff and died, and this is, what, the afterlife? Or maybe transmigration. Her mind, her consciousness, her soul, whatever she wanted to call it, had somehow occupied another person's body. Erin's body, whoever she'd been. The idea should be terrifying, and it was. But there was also something strangely liberating about it. If this was really happening, there was no thesis to finish, no demanding advisor, no expectations. Davina laughed softly in the darkness. It was a sound without much humor. She looked at her hands in the dim light filtering through the hut's opening. Small, pale, without the perpetual dirt under the nails that marked years of excavations. Oh, this is my life now. She closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Chapter 3. You look awful. Davina looked up from the porridge she was stirring. The girl from yesterday stood beside her, assessing her face with genuine concern. Didn't sleep well, Davina admitted. It was true. Nervous about the ceremony? The ceremony rite. That's today. Something like that, Davina mumbled. A third voice interrupted.
Leah, Leave her alone. The day hasn't even started and you're already bothering her.
Davina turned her head. It was the man she'd watched training yesterday. Castiel was tall, with blonde hair falling messily over his eyes. His smile came easy, relaxed, the kind of expression that suggested he didn't take much seriously. There was a lightness to him that contrasted completely with Caden's suffocating intensity. Before Davina could process his arrival, he reached out and ruffled her hair completely spontaneously, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Her body reacted instantly. Her cheeks warmed alarmingly. Her heart raced, beating against her ribs as if trying to escape. Embarrassment, sharp and irrational, flooded her chest. Apparently, Erin suffered from a terrible blushing problem, especially in Castiel's presence. Davina mentally rolled her eyes at her own body's ridiculous reaction. She felt nothing for him, but Erin's body had other ideas and was making that embarrassingly clear.
Erin,
Castiel said, his expression growing slightly more serious, even though his tone stayed light. You need to give this up. Davina blinked at him, genuinely confused. Give what up? Going to the ceremony, Castiel replied. He glanced past her, as if checking whether anyone was listening. The Alpha's been watching you since yesterday. That's not good. Davina frowned, doing her best to ignore the stubborn heat rising in her cheeks. Why wouldn't it be good? Because, Castiel lowered his voice and leaned a little closer. Because everyone's expecting him to choose Rhea. She's the beta's daughter. Davina took a moment to put the pieces together. Pack politics. An arranged marriage to consolidate power. Castiel's brow tightened. What? Nothing. Continue. If you act normal, he'll ignore you like he always does, and you stay safe. But if you keep acting like this, Davina nodded before he even finished. I'll attract unwanted attention. Got it. She straightened a little, her tone calmer now. Thanks for the warning. I'll try to be more discreet. Castiel looked relieved, then smiled again. That easy, brotherly smile he gave her shoulder a light pat. A shoulder pat, as if she were a younger sister who needed guidance. Erin, you silly girl, Davina thought, watching him walk away. He clearly saw you as a little sister. Chapter 4. All pack members gathered around the altar. Torches burned. The sky was stained red. Davina stood in the back, trying to be invisible, when a boy nudged her. All of you need to stand up front, he whispered. Why? So the Alpha can see its tradition. This sounds like a cattle auction. What? Nothing. Davina sighed and moved forward reluctantly. There were many candidates. Davina counted at least 20. Rhea stood at the front, naturally. The others spread in a semicircle, some nervous, repeatedly adjusting their clothes, others bored, clearly present only out of obligation, and a few with ambitious looks suggesting foolish hopes. Thunder echoed. The beta emerged, a massive wolf with battle scars, and began speechifying about tradition, strength, and the importance of the Alpha's choice. Davina tried to pay attention but was distracted by the fact that she could smell things much better now. So this is the famous wolf sense of smell. Fascinating. I can distinguish at least 15 different scents just in this area. I'll definitely have to study this if— And now, the beta thundered, our Alpha will make his choice. Everyone turned. Caden emerged from the shadows, and Davina had to admit, he was impressive tall, imposing, with those red eyes glowing in the torchlight. He wore a dark fur cloak and had a presence that made everyone automatically bow. Caden walked to the center, his gaze sweeping over the candidates. One by one, the candidates presented themselves. Rhea was eloquent, speaking about strength, leadership, and pack unity with the confidence of someone who already knew she'd won. Others followed with varied speeches, some nervous, stammering about devotion and loyalty, others more rehearsed, speaking of tradition and honor. He paused on Rhea. She smiled, confident. He looked at the others. They nearly fainted from nervousness. Then his eyes found Davina, who was mentally distracted. Omega Erin, his voice echoed. Davina looked up. Yes? Your speech. Davina walked to the front, very aware of all eyes on her. Caden watched her with that unreadable expression, red eyes fixed on her, waiting.
I'm Erin.
Omega.
Which is obvious, everyone knows that. I work hard, carry water, mostly. Help where needed.
She was basically listing household chores now. Impressive. And I like to learn things about things. Brilliant. Davina, truly inspiring. So yeah, that. She waved vaguely. Thank you. Whispers exploded through the crowd. Someone choked. She returned to her spot quickly, ignoring the stares around her. Leah, her friend, looked mortified. Castiel covered his face with one hand. A moment of silence. Then Caden turned to the crowd. I choose Omega Erin. The beta looked like he was about to have a heart attack. What? The beta began. You can't, someone else protested. Caden simply stared at them. His alpha aura filled the space, heavy and suffocating, until everyone fell silent. I can, he said calmly, and I have. Davina raised her hand. Sorry, does my opinion count in this decision? Because I vote no. Everyone stared at her in disbelief. Caden turned to her. The Alpha chooses. The Omega accepts. My opinion should count. Participatory democracy would result in more balanced decisions, and he took her by the arm, not forcefully but firm. Let's go, he said. Where? My cabin. Why? Tradition. This tradition is terrible and needs revision. But he was already walking, pulling her behind him, while the entire pack watched in absolute shock. Chapter 5. The door closed behind them with a sound that echoed in the silent cabin. Davina stood near the entrance, her eyes scanning the space. The cabin was larger than hers, significantly larger. High ceiling of dark wood, reinforced walls, a stone fireplace where flames crackled low, animal pelts covered the floor and part of the walls. In the back, a single large bed made of thick logs and fur covers. Caden walked to the fireplace, his back to her. The silence stretched. Davina felt her heart accelerate slightly. She was alone, with him in an enclosed space, and there was only one bed. The door behind her suddenly seemed very far away. Calm down, breathe. Think rationally. But rationality was difficult when her entire body was tense, alert. You can sleep in the bed, Caden said without turning. His voice was flat, without inflection. I'll stay here. Davina blinked, confused. What? The bed is yours. He pointed vaguely toward the back of the cabin, still not looking at her. But I'm not going to touch you. He finally turned, and his red eyes were cold as ice, without emotion. Without anything. If that's what you're thinking, you can stop. There's no reason to worry. The coldness in his voice was almost cutting. Davina felt the tension in her shoulders relax minimally, but something tightened in her chest. Why did you choose me? The question came out lower than she intended. Caden didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at her with that unreadable expression. The fire crackled. Shadows danced on the walls. The silence grew, became heavy, dense, almost suffocating. Davina was about to repeat the question when he finally spoke. They were pressuring me. His voice was low, controlled. To choose Rhea. The elders, the beta, half the council. They said she was strong. Suitable, the obvious choice. He paused, looking at the fire for a moment. I didn't want to. He turned back to her. So I chose you. His eyes pierced her. But don't mistake what this means. You mean nothing to me? Don't imagine there's something between us. Don't get your hopes up. The words were like blades cold, precise, brutally honest. Davina processed this for a moment, then nodded. I'm not imagining anything. Good, he replied, his voice low and firm. Good, she echoed, maintaining the same neutral tone. They stared at each other for another second. Then Caden moved. He took one of the larger pelts from the floor, spread it near the fireplace with efficient movements, and lay down on it, his back to Davina. Davina stood for a few more moments, processing the ceremony. The choice. This strange, tense conversation. He chose me to defy the others. I'm just a convenient piece in his game. For some reason, that made strange sense. She walked to the bed. The furs were soft, thick. She lay down, still dressed, and pulled one of the covers over herself. The fire illuminated the space with a soft, dancing light. She could see Caden's silhouette on the floor, motionless. I should be nervous, afraid, but she wasn't. Maybe it was the emotional exhaustion of the last 48 hours. Maybe it was because if he wanted to do something, he would have already done it. Or maybe, on some deep level, she still didn't completely believe this was real. Her eyes closed, and surprisingly, she slept. Caden stayed awake for a long time after her breathing regulated. He stared at the fire, processing his own impulsive choice. He turned slightly, enough to see the bed. She was deeply asleep, breathing soft. Face relaxed. How can she sleep like that? Any other woman would have stayed awake all night, trembling. But she just slept, as if being there were the most normal thing in the world, as if she trusted him, or as if she didn't care enough to be afraid. Caden didn't know which option bothered him more. He turned back to the fire. She means nothing. As soon as Caden's breathing became deep and regular, Davina moved. The plan was simple. Reach the cliff, the place where it all began. Her last memory before waking in this body. The logic was fragile, desperate, but it was all she had. Maybe somehow that place was the door back. His choice only complicates everything, she thought, as she slipped through the door. I didn't ask for this. I just wanted peace. The night was cold. Davina hugged herself but continued. 20 minutes of walking, and she arrived. The cliff rose dramatically against the night sky, its edge jagged like irregular teeth. Far, far below, the river ran black and violent, reflecting fragments of moonlight. When she reached the cliff's edge, the sound of stones rolling down to the river below echoed like a warning. Wind roared through the trees, pulling at her hair. The abyss seemed to call her. She took a deep breath, fighting to build courage. This is how I get back. It's the only way. She was inches from the edge now, her toes practically in the air. The abyss seemed to call her, pull her, as if the void had gravity of its own. Davina opened her eyes, looking down one last time. 3, 2. Suddenly, a strong hand grabbed her arm. What are you doing? Caden's voice was rough, loaded with surprise. She turned, startled. I'm not who you think I am. I need to go back, and this is the only way. He stared at her, incredulous. "You're delirious." She didn't respond, because before she could, her foot slipped on the wet stones. Everything happened in slow motion and impossible speed at the same time. The gravel gave way beneath her feet. Her weight shifted. Caden's arms tried to pull her back, but it was too late. The world became a blur of sky, and a scream caught in her throat. Wind roared past her ears, so loud it drowned out everything else. The impact was brutal, and then the void. Caden surfaced first, coughing violently, spitting river water. As Alpha, his body had superhuman endurance. She, however, lay motionless on the rocks. Blood trickled from her temple, her chest barely moving. He ran to her, instinct taking control. "Erin!" The word came out as a ragged whisper. He pulled her from the water with desperate care, turning her on her side so she wouldn't choke. His fingers went to her wrist, searching for a heartbeat. It was there, weak. Too fast, irregular. Caden looked around frantically, searching for, what? Help? He was miles from the pack, in the middle of the night, with an Omega on the verge of death in his arms. There was no time. If I do nothing, she dies. Caden looked at her face, so pale in the moonlight, lips blue with cold, eyes closed. Wind cut his face, water rushed over the stones, and his blood pounded in his temples. Caden assessed the situation in seconds, searching for any other option. There was no way to save her without risking everything. He closed his eyes for an instant, trying to control the flow of thoughts. There was no room for sentimentality. Alpha blood could save her, but giving his own blood meant creating a deep, irrevocable bond. Still, instinct spoke louder. Caden took a deep breath, feeling the tension in his hands and chest. With a decisive movement, he extended his arm and drew his claw across his own wrist. His blood, warm and golden under the moon, touched her lips. For an instant, nothing happened. Then her body arched violently. The wounds began to close, skin reconstructing before his own eyes. Intense heat coursed through her veins, mixed with cold, fire and ice dancing beneath the skin. Her eyes opened, glowing with the red color of the ancestral wolf proof of what he'd done. Her heartbeats aligned with his, pulsing in sync. He, in turn, felt her pain cross through the bond, as if each wound were his, the broken ribs, the penetrating cold in the bones. The bond between them stretched, deepened, binding one to the other in something neither fully understood. She finally opened her eyes, confused. What happened? How did we end up here?" "We fell," he answered, his voice hoarse. "You were dying, so I gave you my blood." "I drank your blood?" She widened her eyes. He raised an eyebrow. "Yes." She stared at him and suddenly gagged. He sighed. "You don't need to be dramatic. It was to heal you." "And what happens when someone drinks an alpha's blood?" she asked, still trembling. "Accelerated healing. The blood carries the pack's power. When you ingest it, it awakens the wolf and forces regeneration." "Fire and ice," she murmured, remembering the sensation. He nodded. "If the person is too weak, they might even lose consciousness." She smiled, teasing. "Strange, because I feel great." He observed her with surprise, a trace of respect in his eyes. "I underestimated you," he admitted quietly. "I thought you wouldn't handle it. Maybe you're stronger than I thought." But before she could respond, her body gave way, and she fainted in his arms. Caden held her firmly, feeling her weight and irregular breathing slowing. For an instant, a slight smile crossed his face. Carefully, but without hurry, he stood. Each step was firm, calculated, as he carried Davina back to the cabin. He wouldn't tell her not yet. That kind of exchange deepened the bond, made the mate bond practically indestructible. Now, he would feel everything she felt, fear, pain, and the instinct for protection and possession inside him grew, fierce and primitive. He held her tighter, eyes fixed on the darkness around them. Chapter 6. Davina woke slowly, still groggy, staring at the unfamiliar wooden ceiling. Why didn't my alarm go off? She sat up, confused, automatically reaching for her phone. There was no nightstand. There was a rough wooden wall, animal pelts, a fireplace with embers still warm. The memory came back all at once. She looked around. The cabin was empty. Caden had already left. Sunlight streamed through an opening covered with thin leather. It was mid-morning, judging by the angle. She sat on the bed, blinking to clear her vision. Morning light filtered through the cabin's gaps, painting everything in golden tones. "Wait," she raised her hands, turning them from side to side. Something seemed different. Davina closed her fists, testing the muscles responded with a strength that hadn't been there before. Memories from the night before returned in fragments. The cliff, the fall, the icy water. She touched her own face, searching for injuries. Nothing. Not even a mark. Davina left the Alpha's cabin and immediately felt the stares. Dozens of them. Wolves stopped what they were doing, carrying water, fixing tools, talking, and turned to watch her descend the wooden steps. Silence spread like ripples on a lake. Davina kept her head up and walked shoulders back. Steps firm, expression neutral. "Erin!" She turned. Castiel was running toward her, worry written across his face. He stopped a few feet away, eyes scanning her as if searching for injuries. "Are you okay?" he asked, breathless. "I heard that everyone's saying, did you really spend the night with him?" "I did," Davina confirmed. "It was uneventful." "Uneventful?" Castiel ran his hand through his hair.
"Erin, Alpha Caden is dangerous, and you—" "I'm fine, Castiel." "Really?" She smiled slightly. He's not as bad as he seems. Castiel studied her for a long moment. Then his shoulders relaxed slightly. You seem different. I slept well, Davina said. He didn't seem entirely convinced, but nodded. Look, about the ceremony. Everyone's talking. Rhea's furious. The beta too. There are rumors they're going to try to contest the choice. Contest how? I don't know, but you need to be careful. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Some people won't accept this easily. I know, Davina said, but I can't change what the Alpha decided. You could refuse. Say you don't want to be his mate. And you think he'd accept that? Castiel opened his mouth, then closed it. They both knew the answer. Just be careful, okay? He touched her shoulder lightly. You matter to me. I don't want you to get hurt.
Davina's body reacted minimally to the touch, that familiar warmth, that tightness in her chest that wasn't hers but Aaron's. That girl still liked him. How ironic she ignored it. I'll be careful, she promised. Castiel nodded and started to walk away, but then paused. Oh, did you hear? Seems there was trouble at the southern border. Some rogue wolves trying to enter the territory. Rogues? Wolves without a pack, usually trouble, he shrugged. While Castiel spoke, movement on the main street caught Davina's attention. Caden was there, walking with 3 council members, older men with rigid postures and serious expressions. They gestured as they spoke, clearly debating something important. Caden had his back to her, listening to one of the counselors with an impassive posture, tense shoulders, hands clasped behind his back. Davina didn't even realize she was staring until Castiel commented. He looks busy, Castiel remarked. Being Alpha can't be easy. Everyone always wanting something from him. Davina murmured, returning her attention to Castiel. You said southern border? Yeah, near the river, seems like. Hey, are you listening to me? Yes, sorry, continue. But in the middle of the street, Caden had stopped walking. One of the counselors was still talking animatedly, gesturing toward some point in the distance. But Caden was no longer paying attention. His head had turned slightly. Not obvious, just enough. His red eyes found Davina across the distance. She was talking with Castiel, smiling slightly at something he'd said, completely oblivious to the observation. Caden watched for 3 full seconds. Saw Castiel touch her shoulder, casual gesture, friendly. Saw Davina nod, relaxed, comfortable in his presence. Something crossed Caden's face, quick, almost imperceptible. His eyes narrowed minimally, his jaw tightened. The hands behind his back clenched into fists for a fraction of a second before relaxing. He blinked, processing his own reaction. The counselor beside him stopped talking, noticing the distraction. Alpha, are you listening? Caden turned back to him, expression returning to absolute neutrality. Continue. But his eyes went to Davina once more before he forced his full attention back to pack matters. And somewhere deep, in the place where the newly formed bond pulsed, he felt an echo of what she was feeling with another wolf. Caden took a deep breath, pushing the feeling away. Chapter 7. Caden sat in the Alpha's chair, listening to the beta talk about the rogues with half his attention. The other half, he realized, no longer belonged to him. Since dawn, there had been something different. A thin thread stretched between him and Davina. Sometimes it was just a distant presence. Other times it was stronger, almost physical. Now it was impossible to ignore. He could feel her, the constant movement of her mind, the whirlwind of sensations that didn't belong to him. Curiosity, discomfort, fear. We can't ignore the threat, the beta was saying, voice loaded with urgency. They've tested our defenses 3 times this week. It's just a matter of time before they try something bigger. Caden blinked slowly, forcing focus. But the bond pulsed again. An internal snap, as if something in her had stirred. A memory, perhaps, or doubt. How many? He asked, just to maintain dialogue. At least 15, maybe more? One of the counselors leaned forward. This isn't a common group of rogues. Organization, Caden murmured. Someone's leading them. Yes. The beta banged on the table, but there was something strange about the gesture. Too performative. That's why we need to act soon. Gather the warriors, reinforce the borders. Show strength before it's too late. Caden observed him, but the thread pulled again, insistent, restless, and with it, the sensation that Davina was moving away. The air grew dense, and the instinct in his chest began to react before reason could follow. Let's observe a bit longer, he said, distracted. Understand the pattern before acting. The beta looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. Observe? While we wait, they get bolder. Alpha, with all respect, you seem distracted lately. The other counselors exchanged cautious glances. Distracted? Caden repeated, voice low but loaded with ice. Since the ceremony, the beta insisted, since you chose that weak Omega. The silence that followed was heavy enough to make the air vibrate. Caden stood, each movement too controlled. My choice of mate is not the council's concern. It is when it affects your ability to lead. Careful, he said, without raising his tone. Are you questioning my leadership? The beta paled. I'm merely expressing concern. Caden stared at him for long seconds, until the man looked away. Reinforce the patrols, double the night guards, but no aggressive action yet understood. The counselors nodded one by one. Caden turned before hearing a response. The pull was stronger now, a kind of knot tightening in his chest. Davina was near the border, and though he'd said nothing, he knew, in the most instinctive and silent way possible, that he needed to go to her. Davina had escaped the common area as soon as she finished her tasks. She needed space. She sat at the river's edge and watched the water flow. She took a deep breath and let thoughts come. She'd been certain the jump would take her back. The same cliff, the same water, but nothing happened. Now, with a clearer head, she began to realize what she might have missed that night. When it all happened, the moon was red, an eclipse. She looked at the clear sky, nothing special about it, no glow, no color, just an ordinary day. She was thinking about this when a shadow fell over her. She looked up slowly. Caden stood there, blocking the sun. His expression was the same as always, cold and distant, but the red eyes were fixed on her. "You should be in the village." Davina's eyes flew open in surprise. Caden stood a few feet away, watching her with that characteristic neutral expression. "You scared me," she said, hand on her chest. "You shouldn't be alone, especially near the border." "Border? The river marks the boundary of our territory." He pointed to the opposite bank. "Everything beyond that line isn't safe." Caden approached and crouched beside her, looking at the water. "What were you thinking about?" Caden asked suddenly. "I was thinking about how to get back," Davina continued, since she was being honest, "to my time. My world." "You always say these strange things," he commented, frowning. "Where do you get this from?" Davina smiled slightly. "You wouldn't understand." "Why not?" She hesitated for an instant. His gaze was too direct. "Because I'm really not from here. But that doesn't matter anymore. I have no way back." Caden fell silent. The sound of the river seemed louder suddenly. "And what will you do now?" he asked finally. "Well, I don't have grand ambitions. I plan to find a sunny spot where I can nap at noon and stay there." "That sounds unproductive," he said without any irony. "Exactly my objective." She gave a half smile and stood, extending her hand to him. "Thanks for saving me, by the way." Caden looked at her hand, confused. "This again? What is this?" "A handshake. It's a way of thanking someone." He hesitated for a second, then touched her hand firmly, copying the gesture. His hands were warm, and the touch was gentle. "Like this?" "Just like that." Davina smiled, and he, for a brief moment, seemed not to know what to do with that smile. Caden looked away first, as if regaining control through force of habit. "Return to the village," he said, voice low, firm, but with something that sounded dangerously close to concern. "I'll patrol the border before returning." For an instant she wanted to argue, but the firmness in his voice made her simply nod. Davina returned to the village as the sun began to set behind the mountains, staining the sky in shades of purple that seemed pulled from a painting. The path was silent, only the sound of night insects beginning their symphony. She should be thinking about practical things, anything normal, but she wasn't. Since the conversation by the river, something in her seemed different. The way he'd looked at her, the way he'd held her hand. She shook her head, trying to push away the thoughts. "Too soon for this. You've known him for what? 2 days? 3? That's not enough time to..." The image of Caden crouched beside her, those red eyes studying her face with almost painful intensity, kept returning. Damn. She entered the empty cabin and began to light the fireplace, lost in thought, when she felt it. First it was a discomfort in her chest, small, almost imperceptible. She stopped, hand still holding the stick she was going to use to stoke the fire. The discomfort grew, became pressure, then discomfort, and then pain. Sharp, sudden, devastating. Davina fell to her knees, the stick escaping her hands, going straight to her stomach as if something inside had just been pierced. "What?" she gasped, doubling over on herself. It wasn't ordinary pain. It was something deeper, more visceral, as if a fundamental part of her was being forcibly torn out, shredded, destroyed from the inside out. And with the pain came rage. Not hers. She recognized it now. It was his. Caden. The physical need to go to him was almost unbearable. Every cell in her body screamed to get up, run, and find him. She tried to stand, legs trembling violently. The pain pulsed in waves, each stronger than the last. "He's hurt. Badly hurt. I need to..." Outside, a sound cut the air. Screams. Hurried footsteps, multiple, running. The metallic clink of weapons being unsheathed. And then the warning howl. Davina forced herself to stand, using the wall for support. The pain was still there, constant, but fear was greater. Rogues has to be rogues, and Caden's there, fighting them, hurt. She ran from the cabin, stumbling over her own legs, one hand still pressed against her stomach where the phantom pain pulsed. When Davina reached the central square, a crowd was already forming. Torches were being lit hastily, casting dancing shadows that made everything seem more chaotic. And then she saw him. Caden emerged from the tree line, walking with measured steps despite being clearly injured. He dragged 2 unconscious rogues across the ground, one in each hand. Behind him, his most trusted warriors emerged from the forest. All were dirty, dust, sweat, blood. Some limped, others had open wounds still bleeding. Caden threw the rogues into the center of the square like sacks of grain. They fell in a disjointed heap, groaning weakly. Only then did Davina see clearly. Caden's shirt was torn on the right side, exposing a deep wound that crossed his ribs. Fresh blood ran down his pale skin, dripping to the ground. His breathing was short, controlled, the kind of breathing that comes when every movement causes pain. But he remained upright, imposing. The alpha who couldn't show weakness, no matter the cost. Davina stayed in the shadows, watching. Part of her wanted to run to him, check the wound. But she knew she couldn't. Not in front of the entire pack. Not when he needed to seem invincible. The captured rogues began to regain consciousness. One of them, the largest, with scars crisscrossing his face, spat blood on the ground and laughed. The sound was harsh, almost hysterical. "They'll love to know," he growled, voice loaded with something between pain and sick triumph, "that the blood moon rises tomorrow." Absolute silence fell over the square. "And when it rises," the rogue continued, smile widening to show blood-stained teeth, "when the total eclipse comes, you'll fall like dry straw in fire. The creature will awaken, and it will devour all of you." He laughed again, the sound echoing in the silent night. Caden approached slowly, each step deliberate despite the obvious pain. He stopped in front of the rogue, looking down with a completely neutral expression. "What creature?" His voice was low, dangerous. "The first," the rogue whispered, eyes shining with almost religious fervor. "The one who came before all. The one who was imprisoned by the weak who feared his power." He spat again. "But the chains are breaking." The ritual is almost complete. Davina felt her blood freeze. "Where?" Caden demanded. "As if I'd tell you," the rogue laughed. "You'll find out when it's too late. When the sky bleeds and the earth cracks and—" Caden silenced him with a quick blow, and the rogue collapsed unconscious again. Caden turned to his warriors. "Take them. Double the guards." Only then did his eyes find Davina through the crowd. For a moment, something passed between them. Then Caden looked away and walked toward the council house, leaving a trail of blood behind. Chapter 8. Hours later, Caden entered the cabin and closed the door behind him with a heavy sound that echoed in the small space. Davina was already standing before he finished closing the door, heart racing, hands restless at her sides. He looked destroyed, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical, covered in dried blood that stained his skin and clothes in shades of dark red and brown. But what really made Davina lose her breath was the tear in his shirt, right above his stomach, where she knew there was a wound. "Are you hurt?" she said, voice coming out louder than intended. His voice was low, hoarse with fatigue. He walked further inside, movements careful, and began to lift his shirt. Davina took a step forward automatically, eyes fixed on the skin being revealed, where she expected to see blood, deep cuts. Now there was only clean skin. Intact, not even a new scar. "I heal fast," he murmured, letting the shirt fall back. But Davina was barely listening. She was processing, memories of the phantom pain that had dropped her to her knees hours ago, still echoing in her body. "Caden!" She took another step, closing the distance between them. Her hand went automatically to her own abdomen, touching exactly where she'd felt the agony. "I felt it." He went still, red eyes fixed on her with intensity that made eye contact difficult. "I felt the pain," Davina continued, voice trembling slightly. "Here. Right here it was like something inside me was being torn apart." Caden's expression changed. Something crossed his eyes. Guilt, concern. "That wasn't yours." Caden looked away, jaw visibly tensing, neck muscles standing out. A long moment of heavy silence. Then he spoke, voice careful, measured, as if choosing each word. "Some bonds, when they're too strong, cross barriers that shouldn't exist between two people. This shouldn't be happening between us. The bond shouldn't be this deep. But it is." He finally turned back to her, and there was something vulnerable in his gaze now. "Sometimes," he continued slowly, "when the connection is strong enough, one's pain echoes and the other thoughts escape. Barriers crumble." Davina absorbed this in silence, feeling something inside her churning fear, because it meant she no longer had complete control over herself, over what she felt, over her own autonomy. "Will this get worse?" she asked quietly. "The bond? Will it keep getting stronger?" Caden hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, the more time we spend together, the deeper the connection becomes. Eventually," he stopped, as if he didn't want to finish the sentence. "Eventually what?" "Eventually there will be no more separation. You'll feel everything I feel." His eyes searched hers. "It'll be like living two lives at once, or like sharing just one." The weight of that statement fell on Davina like stone. They stared at each other for another moment. Then Caden turned his back abruptly, as if he needed distance, and went to the corner of the cabin where the wooden floor seemed slightly loose, the board responding differently under his fingers. He knelt, touched the edge carefully, and found the hidden crack. With a soft click, the wood gave way. Caden pulled the board, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the floor. Caden reached his arm inside and began rummaging through the contents, the sound of objects colliding echoing in the small space. Davina watched him, still processing everything he'd just revealed. Finally, Caden found what he was looking for. A dark bottle, almost black, with a cork stopper tied with cord. "What is that?" "Fermented drink." He stood, turning the bottle in his hands. Davina's eyes widened. "Alcohol. You have alcohol here?" Caden frowned slightly, confused by her surprise. "You mean mead?" Mead? Yes. He spoke as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Mead, Davina repeated, a small smile appearing despite everything. Of course. Why not? Caden removed the cork with his teeth, fluid, practical movement, and took a long drink straight from the bottle. His face showed no reaction to the taste. Then he extended the bottle to her, eyebrow raised in silent challenge. Are you just going to stare at me? He asked. Or are you going to drink? Davina took the bottle, feeling its weight, the warmth of the glass where his hands had held it. She brought it to her lips and drank. The first sip was brutal. It burned going down her throat like liquid fire. She coughed violently, eyes watering. My God, this is horrible. Caden looked away, but Davina saw it, a trace of a smile crossing his face for an instant brief, almost invisible. It's what we have, he said, but there was amusement in his voice. Davina wiped her eyes, still catching her breath. You people drink this voluntarily? For pleasure? You get used to it. I seriously doubt that. But she took another sip anyway, and another, and began to realize Caden was right. After a few, the taste became less offensive, or maybe her taste buds just gave up complaining. They sat on the floor, leaning near the fireplace where embers still glowed softly. The bottle went back and forth, and with each sip, Davina felt the mead's warmth spreading through her body, relaxing muscles she didn't even know were tense. Caden poked at the embers with a piece of wood, watching the sparks dance. You said you're not from here, he spoke suddenly, still looking at the fire. I'm not, Davina confirmed. He raised his red eyes to her, and the firelight made them seem even more intense. So, where did you come from? In your place, how are things? From the way he spoke, slow and distracted, you could tell it was just the mead loosening his guard, allowing him to touch on unlikely subjects without fear, because at that moment, nothing needed to be real. The moment seemed to call for a nice story to accompany the mead. The alcohol had also loosened Davina's tongue, lowered her mental barriers. She took a deep breath. Different, very different. She took another sip before continuing. We have technology machines that do things. Caden frowned. Machines? He said, as if testing the word. Yes, they're objects created by people. Tools that work by themselves. So many you can't list them all. Machines for flying. Machines for talking to people on the other side of the world. Machines for making food. She gestured vaguely. Machines for everything. Machines for flying. Caden repeated slowly, clearly trying to process. Like birds? Yes. Exactly like birds, but made of metal. And much bigger, they carry hundreds of people at once. He stared at her as if she'd just said the moon was made of cheese. Hundreds of people. In something that flies made of metal? Yes. That's impossible. Not in my time, Davina smiled. And we don't have packs. I mean, we do, but not literally. That doesn't make sense. I know. She laughed, the sound light and easy with the help of the mead. And Caden listened, really listened, with a focused attention that Davina rarely received from anyone. She talked about electricity, energy that came from inside walls and could light lights, heat things, make machines work. Caden fell silent for long seconds after that explanation, clearly trying to understand. How does the energy get into the walls? He asked finally. Through wires that come from big places that generate the energy. That come from... Look, it's complicated. Even I don't fully understand. Your whole world runs on things you don't understand? Nah, basically yes. Caden shook his head slowly, something between admiration and disbelief, then looked at her with what could be genuine amusement. Your world sounds insane. I know. Davina stared at him, smiling. So does yours. He let out air in an almost smile. Fair enough. The bottle was almost empty when Caden dropped the piece of wood he'd been using to stir the embers and rested his forearms on his knees. His posture changed, became heavier somehow, less guarded. His voice lowered, became deeper, more sincere. I don't have family. The words fell between them like stones in still water. Davina turned her face slowly. Caden rarely spoke about himself, and never like this. So open, so vulnerable. My father was the alpha before me. He looked at the fire as if he could see ghosts dancing in the flames. He was strong, respected, feared. Everything an alpha should be. Davina didn't dare speak, just waited. He died when I was 16, Caden continued, voice even lower now. Ambush, rival pack. They caught him by surprise, which should never have happened because my father was the best warrior I ever saw. His fingers tightened around the bottle. But it happened, and suddenly I was alpha. 16 years old, knew nothing, wasn't ready. My father had planned to teach me, pass on knowledge, prepare me, but there wasn't time. Davina felt her chest tighten, not from pity, but from recognition, from understanding someone who never had the chance to choose who they'd be. And in this place, Caden continued, jaw tightening, politics are simple, brutal, but simple. The strongest leads, the weak die or are subjugated. There's no room for hesitation or weakness. He finally turned to her, and his eyes were full of old but still living pain. So I had to become the strongest quickly. No margin for error. I'm sorry, Davina whispered. My mother died giving birth to me, he said suddenly, as if he needed to tell everything now. So I never knew her? Davina didn't know what to say, so she simply extended her hand and took his. Caden looked at their intertwined hands for a moment, then squeezed back. The hours passed without them noticing. The fire diminished to warm embers. The bottle became completely empty. resting forgotten on the floor between them. The room fell silent, filled only by the sound of soft breathing and the occasional crackle of wood. Davina rested her head on his shoulder, without noticing the exact moment she did it. It was warm there, solid, safe in a strange and dangerous way she couldn't fully explain. Caden didn't pull away. On the contrary, he moved slightly, adjusting his position to accommodate her better, and rested his own head against hers. For an instant, her eyes, heavy with mead, met his and stayed locked there. Her gaze slipped, abandoning his eyes, descending along the contour of his face until stopping at the corner of his mouth. There was something dangerous in that slow gesture, too unconscious to be planned, too intimate for him to ignore. He forgot to breathe. His gaze wavered, following the inverse path she'd traced, from her eyes to the line of her face, descending until stopping at the corner of her mouth, where her lower lip marked, soft, vulnerable, a curve that shouldn't have caught his attention that way. The tension between them stretched, thin as glass about to crack. For a second, he had the ridiculous impression that he only needed to tilt his head a few centimeters, and everything would change. Terrible idea, he thought. But part of him remained still, wishing the distance between them would be eliminated. It was exactly at that moment that her body decided to give up. Davina's weight relaxed all at once, leaning a bit more against him. Her gaze lost focus completely. Her eyelids fell slowly and she fell asleep there, with her face absurdly close to his. Caden remained still, staring at her now serene profile with his heart beating too fast for someone who hadn't moved. How can she fall asleep at a moment like this? The question crossed his mind, leaving a warm trail that rose from his neck to his ears. He let out air he didn't know he was holding and adjusted her carefully, as if afraid to wake her. His eyes closed slowly, reluctantly. Without noticing when, his hand found hers. Their fingers brushed, hesitated, and ended up intertwined in a loose, almost distracted gesture that didn't match at all the discipline he preached to the rest of the world. There, in the darkness of the room, with the sweet smell of mead still in the air and her warm weight leaning on his shoulder, Caden allowed himself the most reckless of all luxuries: rest. And so, leaning against each other, they fell asleep. Chapter 9. The next day, Caden woke with all his worries exactly where he'd left them. He'd spent the entire morning pacing back and forth across the room, as if constant movement could somehow solve the problem gnawing at him. Davina watched him from the bed, arms wrapped around her knees, feeling through the bond that storm of emotions he was desperately trying to hide. There somewhere, Caden murmured, voice low and dangerous. He was talking more to himself than to her, performing the ritual, and I can't figure out where they are. His hand hit the wall hard enough to make the wood groan. Davina saw his knuckles turn white. Everyone knew the blood moon was coming, and with it, something that shouldn't awaken. Caden, Davina began, but he continued. And the beta, his voice hardened even more. The beta disappeared without a trace. I suspect he knows something. He turned to her, and his red eyes gleamed with intensity that made eye contact difficult. Davina stood slowly, feeling her heart accelerate as fragments of memories, nebulous and confused before but now clear as crystal, surfaced in her mind. The colossal wolf, so large it blocked the sky. The runes carved in stone. The cave hidden in the cliff. I know where it is, she said finally. Caden stopped mid-movement, his entire body freezing as if he'd hit an invisible wall. I know you don't believe me, but the place where I fell, she said, voice gaining certainty with each word. At the cliff I saw runes there, Caden. Ancient ones. She closed her eyes, forcing the memory to stay clear. They were glowing, pulsing with light red as blood. And there was an entrance, a sealed tomb, so many that they covered the entire stone surface. Caden took a step toward her, movement so fast Davina didn't even see it. Suddenly he was there, hands on her shoulders, eyes searching hers with intensity that made the air between them vibrate. Are you absolutely certain? His voice was controlled, but Davina could hear the desperation underneath. This is critical, Davina. If we're wrong, I'm certain I was running from something. A creature enormous. Lupine. She touched her own chest, where the memory still hurt. Before coming here, I saw it emerging from somewhere beneath the earth. From inside that sealed tomb. Caden's face went pale in a way she'd never seen. You know what it is? Davina asked, squeezing his hands. You know this thing? Legends, Caden said, voice coming out hoarse. Ancient stories that elders tell to scare pups when they misbehave. The primordial wolf, the devourer. The first of all of us. He ran his hand through his hair, disheveling it more. They say it was the first werewolf, that it devoured its own pack, that it killed everything in its path until there was nothing left to kill, that it took generations of alphas to imprison it. Do you think it's real? I thought it wasn't. We all did. It's impossible, creatures like that don't exist. He met her eyes, and Davina saw the truth there. But if the runes are really there, his jaw tightened. Silence fell between them, heavy, suffocating. Then Caden released her shoulders and turned abruptly. We need to go. Now, the meeting happened in the central square. Caden summoned his best warriors, 17 in total. They gathered in silence, faces grave. The northern cliff, Caden announced, voice echoing through the square as warriors leaned forward, completely attentive. There are ancient runes in an ancestral tomb, and the rogues are performing a ritual there. Our objective is simple. Stop them from completing it. What if they've already finished? Someone asked. Caden stayed quiet for one heartbeat. Then we pray to the ancestral gods that still remember our names, he said finally. And the beta? Another warrior asked, voice tinged with pain and confusion. Betrayal hurt more from within. Caden's expression became something terrible to behold. If he's there, his voice was so cold that Davina felt a chill through the bond. I'll deal with him myself. No one argued. They set out under the last breath of daylight, the sun sinking behind the mountains as if fleeing from what was to come. Chapter 10. The forest was silent in a way that made the hair on the back of Davina's neck stand on end. No birds singing their evening songs, no insects buzzing between the trees. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. Davina ran alongside Caden, her muscles, strengthened by the alpha blood now flowing through her veins, allowing her to keep pace at a speed that would have been impossible weeks ago. Castiel followed close behind. The sky was darkening fast, night devouring day with ravenous hunger, and there, on the horizon beyond the trees, the rising moon already showed a touch of red along its lower edge. They reached the cliff when darkness was nearly complete, only the first stars beginning to emerge, and immediately, everyone knew they were in the right place. The smell of blood was overwhelming. Torches burned in an irregular circle at the cliff's edge, their flames dancing in colors that weren't entirely natural, and sounds. Guttural chanting in a language Davina didn't recognize but that made her skin crawl. Caden raised his hand, stopping the group with a silent gesture. He motioned to 3 warriors. Reconnaissance. Silent fast. They disappeared into the shadows like ghosts. Davina counted the seconds the warriors returned, moving quickly now, urgency in every line of their bodies. 40, maybe 50, one whispered, voice barely audible, all in perfect ritual formation. And there's someone leading them. The beta, Caden said. Yes, and he, the warrior hesitated, as if the next words were too difficult to say. He's changed. He doesn't look the same anymore. Caden closed his eyes for a moment, and Davina felt through the bond, betrayal cutting like a knife, rage burning so hot it was almost impossible to control. When Caden opened his eyes again, there was nothing left but ice-cold determination. Positions, he ordered quietly. No one backed down. No one questioned. The cave was enormous, opening into a natural chamber that seemed to have been carved by giant hands in immemorial times. At the exact center, a circle of fresh blood. So perfectly round it could only be ritual symbols that Davina recognized from ancient studies marked the edge. And inside the circle, a fissure in the ground. Davina felt bile rise in her throat. The rogues were arranged around it in perfect concentric formation, chanting in unison, voices blending in dissonant harmony that made bones vibrate. And there, at the front of them all, stood the beta. He had changed in ways that made Davina want to look away. Dark veins crossed his exposed skin like roots. He was larger, hulking, his eyes completely black. No white, no iris, no humanity. In his hand, he held a ritual dagger. As Davina watched, he raised the dagger in the air and drove it into his own chest. Blood gushed, but it wasn't red. It was black as tar, thick as oil, and smoking as if it were boiling. The black blood hit the circle, and the fissure pulsed, once hard, as if something on the other side had answered. Now, Caden roared, his voice tearing through the night. Caden's warriors descended upon the rogues like an avalanche of fury and claws. The element of surprise lasted maybe 3 seconds, long enough for 5 rogues to fall before they knew they were under attack. Caden transformed completely mid-movement. A massive black wolf with eyes like burning embers emerged, and he launched himself straight through the battle toward the beta. They collided with an impact that literally cracked the stone floor, sending fragments flying. Davina was separated from the main group immediately. 2 rogues, wild eyes, foam at the corners of their mouths, saw her and decided an omega would be easy prey. The instinct she didn't even know she had took over. She rolled under the first lunge, knife sliding from its sheath in a fluid motion. She sliced the tendon of the rogue's hind leg as she passed. He howled, stumbling. The second came from the side, trying to get her throat. Davina threw herself backward, almost too slow. Claws touched her skin when a howl cut through the night. Castiel. He appeared in a furious sprint, his body transforming midair, bones cracking, muscles elongating, skin covering with gray fur. In seconds, a giant wolf took his place. Castiel leaped onto the rogue attacking Davina, tearing him apart with brutal force. He snarled at her for an instant. Recognition, protection, an ancient bond. Then he returned to the fight, already limping. blood streaming from a deep gash in his side. But there were so many, far more than 40 or 50. The chamber was full of them, a horde of transformed bodies fighting with the ferocity of the possessed. And then the moon reached position. Total eclipse. Blood red bathing everything, turning gray stone a sickly crimson. The sound was like mountains splitting in half. Combatants were thrown to the ground. Stones rained from the ceiling. A crack the size of a human arm appeared in the wall, traversing the entire chamber. The runes exploded in light so bright it was blinding, and then something began to emerge from the fissure. A claw first. Davina forced her eyes open through tears and saw. Black, not black, like the absence of color, but black like the presence of physical darkness. Larger than a human torso, claws long as curved swords, each sharp enough to cut stone like butter, dripping oxidized copper-colored ichor that smoked where it touched the ground. Then another claw. The creature dragged itself out of the fissure as if tearing through a membrane between worlds. Davina couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare in paralyzing horror. It had the shape of a wolf, but it was wrong in every conceivable detail. Intelligent eyes aware, calculating, and absolutely terribly hungry. The creature emerged completely, shaking millennia-old dust from its body. The chamber seemed too small to contain it. It seemed like reality was having trouble processing it. The creature took a step. The earth literally sank beneath its paw stone, cracking, melting at the edge where that ancient thing touched. Vapor rising in spirals that smelled of sulfur and death. The beta chose that moment to speak, voice full of mad triumph. Behold, behold the true power, the first, the devourer. He bowed before the creature, so low that his forehead touched the blood-stained stone. Master, I have freed you. I have brought you back to this world. He raised his head, black eyes gleaming with fanatic fervor. Now give me what was promised. Transform me. Give me power. The creature swallowed him in a single bite. That's when Davina saw it. Outside, on the cliff where it had all begun, a light was forming. A portal, an exit, the only chance. The light grew. Pulsing with the eclipse, she could feel the energy. Just a few steps away, Davina looked at the light, then at Caden, who was fighting 3 rogues simultaneously, already bleeding from multiple wounds, movements getting slower with each second. Then at the ancestral creature, which had finished devouring the beta and was advancing. Decision. Now, go back or stay. Davina walked backward, toward the light one step, hesitant. The creature followed her with its eyes, but didn't attack yet. 2 steps. The light was stronger now. Davina could feel its heat on her skin, could hear the low hum of energy that didn't belong to this world. 3 steps. She extended her hand, fingers trembling. The light responded, shining even brighter, almost inviting. The air around vibrated. She could feel the edge of reality, so thin here, so fragile. Her fingers touched the edge of the light. But the bond awakened. Sharp pain tore through Davina, as if someone had literally driven a hook into her heart and pulled with all their strength. She fell to her knees, hands still extended but unable to move further. And through the bond, with crystal clarity impossible to ignore, she felt Caden falling to his knees too, hundreds of meters distant. The creature advancing on him now, losing interest in Davina. Enormous fangs piercing his shoulder, penetrating muscle, cracking bone. Pain. So much pain it was impossible to process. No! Davina screamed, voice tearing through her throat. The portal was open, pulsing, waiting, calling. Her chance, her only chance. Once per generation, once per eclipse, once per perfect alignment. But Caden was dying. In the last second, when the red light of the moon was about to swallow the portal, when the window between worlds was closing, Davina turned and ran in the opposite direction. Behind her, the portal pleaded for one more second glowed, pulsed, and then collapsed in on itself with a sound like a sad sigh, disappeared. And Davina didn't look back once. Chapter 11. The creature was over Caden, jaws opening for the final blow that would tear his head from his shoulders. Castiel tried to intervene, throwing himself with all the force of his massive lupine body, but the creature struck him with a hind paw, without even looking. Castiel flew through the air like a ragdoll, colliding with the rocky wall with force that made stones rain down. He slid to the ground, not moving, blood trickling from his mouth. Davina ran faster than she'd ever run in her life. She wouldn't make it too far, too slow. The creature began to close its jaws, and then power invaded every cell of Davina's body. Power that wasn't hers, that didn't belong to her fragile human body, that came from somewhere deep and primal where her blood and Caden's blood had mixed and become something completely new, something that had never existed before. Her body reacted before her mind could process. Pain tore through her, bones breaking with sounds like dry twigs, reforming into configurations that weren't human, muscles tearing like paper, growing, elongating, skin stretching to the point of rupture, fur emerging. She fell, screaming, and the scream rose in frequency, became deeper, wilder, until it became a roar. The wave of pure force threw rogues away like leaves in a storm. When the light dissipated, a wolf was standing. Not as large as Caden, more slender, built for speed where he was built for power. Silver fur that gleamed in the light of the runes and red eyes like his. The wolf, Davina, raised her head and roared again, a sound that made the chamber itself tremble. And the ancestral creature stopped, released Caden, letting him fall like a sack of broken bones, turned those terrible yellow eyes to Davina. The two wolves stared at each other across the chaotic chamber. Then Davina attacked. She had no training, no experience, no idea what she was doing, but she had rage, and rage was fuel enough. The collision was like thunder splitting the night sky. Davina was smaller, weaker by any physical measure, but she had speed. The creature was powerful beyond measure. Each blow could crush bones like twigs. Each bite could tear off entire limbs. But it was slow millennia asleep had robbed it of the agility it once possessed. Davina bit the left hind leg. The creature roared, a sound that made stones from the ceiling begin to fall like deadly rain. It spun faster than something so large should be able to, claws tearing through the air where Davina had been a second before. Davina rolled, barely fast enough, felt the wind from the passing claws against her flank. Too close. Caden was getting up now. Staggering blood streamed from his shoulder where teeth had pierced, but his eyes were focused and clear. The creature roared again, frustrated by prey that refused to die easily. She charged, jaws open. Davina tried to jump to the side, but loose gravel betrayed her paws. She slipped. The jaw descended, but Caden collided with the creature from the side. Even wounded, even exhausted, even with broken ribs. He hit it with all the force he had. The creature staggered. Aaron! Caden's voice emerged inside her mind, urgent. The runes! The runes. Yes, Davina forced the transformation to reverse. Agonizing, like tearing off skin, but necessary because she needed human hands for what came next. The ritual circle was broken in 4 places that maintained the prison. I need to close the circuit. The creature roared violently. Caden counterattacked. Claws drove into the creature's massive neck. Jaws closed at the base of the skull, teeth seeking spine. The creature tried to tear Caden off like a bothersome parasite, but he held on because Davina needed time. Davina ran to the first broken rune, grabbed the knife from her belt, and without hesitating, cut her own palm. Deep through the lifeline, blood gushed. She pressed it against the gap in the rune. For a second, nothing. Then the rune lit up. Red light pulsed, running along the engraved lines like fire on a gunpowder trail. It works. Thank the ancient gods, it works. Second rune. The creature managed to grab Caden. Claws tore through his back. He screamed, a sound of pure agony, but didn't let go. Davina stumbled, vision darkening from blood loss. Third rune, blood. Light. The creature finally managed to tear Caden off. He flew through the air, colliding with a pile of stones. Didn't get up this time. Through the bond, Davina felt so much pain. The creature turned to Davina now, began to run. Earth shook with each step. Fourth rune. Davina pressed her bleeding palm, but the rune hesitated, pulsed. Almost lit, almost. Not enough, I need more blood. Davina did the only thing she could. Grabbed the knife with the hand that still wasn't bleeding enough, and cut deeper. Blood flooded. The creature leapt, jaws open to swallow Davina whole. The 4 runes connected, lines of red light running between them faster than the eye could follow. The circle became complete. The seal became absolute, and the fissure inverted. The creature, inches from swallowing Davina, stopped midair. It knew what was coming. The suction began. The creature tried to resist. Claws drove into stones so deeply they left marks. It roared with everything it had, fury and terror and refusal. But the seal was absolute, woven by power more ancient than it. Reality bent around it, and with one last roar, a sound of pure rage that would echo in nightmares for generations, it was pulled completely inside. The fissure closed like a wound sealing. The runes pulsed one last time, bright as a rising sun, and then darkened, purpose fulfilled. Davina fell to her knees, world spinning, vision reduced to a narrow tunnel, blood loss, exhaustion, shock. Caden's warriors collapsed where they stood, too exhausted to even celebrate victory. Castiel lay meters back, breathing shallowly, blood pooling around his body, but alive. And Caden? Davina forced herself to move, legs shaking so violently they could barely support her. She stumbled through the chamber until she reached where he was, motionless among broken stones and blood. No, she whispered, falling to her knees beside him. You can't. Her hands went to his chest, searching for a heartbeat. Nothing. Please, please. Caden! Davina shook him, gentle but urgent. Caden, wake up! He groaned, a low, painful sound. Eyes blinked open, dull red, glazed with pain, but conscious. Aaron. Voice hoarse, broken, barely more than a whisper. The seal is reactivated, it's over, she finally said, relieved. He raised his hand, painful movement, trembling, and touched her face with the reverence of someone touching something sacred. Finally, he pulled her down, gentle despite the pain, bringing his mouth to hers. The kiss was salty with tears and blood. It was rough and broken. When they separated, the sky visible through the cave opening was changing. The moon was gradually losing its red, returning to normal silvery white. Eclipse ending. Portal closed forever, and Davina felt not a trace of regret. Days later, the pack buried their warriors with honors. 8 names added to the memorial stone. Castiel survived, though he walked with a limp, but the healer assured that with rest and proper treatment, he would recover completely. He and Caden had developed something close to friendship, or at least mutual respect. The surviving rogues had scattered, and the threat, at least for now, was neutralized. Epilogue. The ceremony took place under a full moon. The entire pack gathered to witness what everyone already knew, but needed to be made official. Davina and Caden, side by side before the elders, hands intertwined. True mates, the oldest elder proclaimed, voice echoing, united by blood and choice recognized by all, blessed by the ancestors. He dipped his fingers in a bowl of dark ink and approached. With precise movements, he painted ancient runes on their foreheads. What has been joined shall not be separated. What has been chosen shall not be undone. Caden turned to Davina and smiled, and in his eyes she saw everything she needed. If he keeps smiling like that, Davina thought, feeling her heart race, I don't know if I can pretend I have any self-control. I can hear that, remember? Caden's voice echoed directly in her mind, warm and amused. Davina and Caden exchanged entertained looks united in their private world, and when they kissed, sealing the bond that was already unbreakable, the pack howled, a howl of celebration, of acceptance, of pure and wild joy. The sound echoed through the forest and beyond, rising up to the full moon above. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, subscribing makes a huge difference. I'd love to have you here for the next story. See you next time.